first of all, I would say it's very wise of you, whether you have a background in science or in engineering or biochemistry, to really keep your options open, because it's never easy when you have a background in science. If you want to find a career outside academia, you have pharma, you have the hospital setting, you have the ministry, you can work for a biotech company. But I can tell you that careers in the pharma, they pay extremely well. That's very important. It's very challenging because you're way up front of drug development and disease development also. Lots of fun, lots of traveling. You get to meet a lot of people. It's not a routine environment. You're constantly stimulated by learning new drugs, new disease area, interacting with a lot of specialists and a lot of nurses all across Canada, but also in the US and in Europe. So today's presentation, I only have about 30 slides, but I tend to speak a lot. I'm shy right now, but as this, I would say, presentation will go on, you'll see that I'll be a little bit more talkative. So what we're going to do, I would say the presentation will be as follows. First, I'm going to introduce you to what is a typical medical department in a pharmaceutical company. 98% of pharmaceutical companies all work the same way. It's all the same people, the same units in all pharmas. Then I'm going to show positions for MSCs, PhDs, as well as bachelor's degree. Positions also for MDs. Those are the most popular positions. Clinical research associates, project managers, medical science liaison, medical advisors, scientific directors. Those are the entry-level positions in the pharma. Then I'm going to go over to give you some top tips how to prepare for the job interview. And I can tell you it took me at least 10 job interviews before I got my first job. So hang in there. Even if you fail the first time, it's not a failure. Sometimes there's just a better candidate. It's just a question of timing. And then last topic, the most important one, is how to behave once you're hired and you get to work in the pharma industry. It's more like whether you work in the Ministry of Education, in a hospital, in academia. I'm going to tell you as part of an adult that if someone had told me that in my 20s, I would have been so grateful. But what I'm going to tell you right now is the same in all work environment. Typical medical department. In all pharmaceutical companies you will go, I would say the structure is always the same. You have your VP medical, the guru, the king in the middle. And you have the clinical research and medical affairs, which I will explain a little bit more in detail on the next slide. Because often when you see job postings for CVs, or on your CVs, they say, we'll be interacting with clinical research unit, we'll be interacting with medical affairs unit. There's a difference between these two, and I'll explain a little bit later on, but it's important for you to know it. Some companies call clinical research clinical operations. Some companies call medical affairs health outcomes unit, phase 4, scientific affairs, post-marketing studies. So there's basically 2 units. And also, you have the regulatory affairs department, the drug safety, pharmacovigilance, medical information, more for pharmacists, and compliance. So today we're going to talk about the jobs in clinical research, regulatory affairs, medical affairs, and drug safety. Medical information is more a position for pharmacists, so I won't go there today. Okay? Of course, you have the medical department, but then as you start working in the pharma, you're going to have a lot of people you're going to be interacting with. It's a unit. A lot of people work in teams. No one works alone. It's rare that you will use the word I in the pharma industry. It's always we, because you get to work with a lot of people, and you need a lot of people in order to achieve results. So obviously there's a marketing department, sales department, sales rep, the legal department to review your contracts, the finance department for your budget, the manufacturing department who manufactures the drug, the government affairs who takes care of dealing with the government, whether or not your drugs are going to be approved or on the hospital listing, and as well as clinical research organizations. CROs started to be popular in about 20 years ago, and right now a lot of people get their foot into the pharma industry coming from clinical research organizations. Okay? I'm going to make the distinction now about, I'm sure you may not know this about the drug development process. This is like a nutshell, helicopter view. It's much more complicated, but I would say it gives you enough to understand what's going on. Usually, all the preclinical testing, the experiments, the phase 1 trials, you hear on the radio, we're looking for a healthy volunteer. The phase 1, the phase 2 studies are dose-ranging studies. Those studies usually happen at the headquarter level. The headquarter could be in the UK, in Europe, Germany, wherever it is. As soon as a drug has potential and it can be developed further, it goes into phase 3 clinical development. And then you have large international trials. Those are the trials that usually countries like Canada participate. If you're hired as a clinical research associate, project manager, not MSL, and you work in clinical research, you're going to be working at that stage. Okay? Once a drug is approved by Health Canada, then you enter into a post-marketing phase. If you're hired as a CRE or project manager working in medical affairs, those are going to be post-marketing studies. Let's say, for example, you have a very good drug that you're testing in patients with diabetes. You realize that patients with diabetes will also have rheumatoid arthritis, don't respond to the drug. You may want to investigate further in these patients a higher dose, a different dose regimen. So that's where it will become a post-marketing study, a medical affairs study. Those studies do not usually change the drug labeling, but they lead to a publication. When you do medical affairs, you deal a lot with McGill, University of Toronto, all the big teaching hospitals. You deal a lot with the specialists too. So it's just to show you the drug development process, how it goes. Clinical trials. Helicopter view. Next one, we're going to get into the jobs. There's a certain amount of routine in the job, but you get to meet with so many people and work in so many different disease areas that the routine is very small in the job. So I hope you like challenges, because the pharma will certainly give you a lot of challenges. As you may know, as soon as a protocol, a clinical research protocol is up, approved, written, then as a CRA, PM, project manager, you will embark into selecting investigators across Canada, obviously not alone. The investigators submit the protocol to the ethics committee to get it approved locally, as well as informed consent. They start recruiting patients. They start filling out case report forms, which are the company documents. The biggest role of pharma is here, is to review the company documents like an auditor to ensure that the medical charts data corresponds to the company charts, because that's where you extract your data, you do your data analysis, and hopefully you get good results and the product gets later on approved. At every stage, clinical research or medical affairs, clinical research associate, project manager, all the jobs I'm going to be talking about, you're involved at every stage here until here. So it's a big loop, but it's important to know this background. We'll talk about tips for the interview later on. Okay, so now I'm going to go quickly to the positions available for in clinical research. Okay, I put yellow, so You know, that's why stickies are yellow, eh? Because the yellow is for the memory. There's a reason why sticky notes are yellow and not green and blue, and green and blue don't work. So I put clinical research associate and project manager together because these positions work hands in hands. As a clinical research associate, you will always interact with project managers. So if we only focus on this part of the slide, clinical research associate is mainly a home-based position, which is kind of cool because you can work in your paging. You can go grocery shopping, get your hair cut at lunchtime, but it requires a lot of traveling. Usually the traveling is either very small, like area. If you're located to Montreal, you're going to go to Quebec City and Sherbrooke. That's going to be your territory. Or sometimes, depending on companies, you're going to be responsible for the eastern part of Canada. So you're going to go to Halifax and to St. John's, Newfoundland. You normally go where the big university hospitals are, where the specialists are. Drug development is usually done with the specialists more than the family physicians. So it requires some travel, which is kind of nice because then you discover your very own country, Canadians. If you're not Canadians, you're discovering how great Canada is. You're responsible for 10 or 15 sites, 10 or 15 hospitals. You need to visit these sites every 6 to 8 weeks. Why? Because you're acting like an auditor. You're going to visit to ensure that the medical charts, all the data corresponds to the company documents. And you need to write visit reports. So that's why we'll see later on they require good written communication. Because if it's not written, it never happened. It's a bit like research experience. If it's not documented in your lab manual, it never happened. This is the big part of what the CRA is doing. I've done this job for 6 years, and I loved it because I learned a lot of therapy areas. I interacted with a lot of doctors, and I can tell you that every year you learn something new. So that's why when I say it's very challenging, it's not routine. You learn something all the time. You see something on TV, on the radio, on the news, you're in forefront. You know what's going on. So it's nice to know what's going to be happening in a certain disease area with drugs too.